I'm going to tell you everything about the benefits of web accessibility in e-commerce. A round of applause, please.
Good afternoon. Welcome to my presentation. I'm really happy that you dedicate your time for this. It's really difficult to compete with lunch and networking, so I really appreciate that. Yeah, just to tell you a few words about my story to better understand why I'm talking about accessibility. Right now I'm running an e-commerce agency focused mostly on Magento. Some of you may know me from like a Magento community involvement. But my story started more than 20 years ago as a typical web development business. And back in time, I was really inspired by, actually by the book, Designing with Web Standards. Maybe some of you know it. It was like a Bible of web development written by New York designer and developer Jeffrey Zeldman. And starting that time, I thought that it's a great idea to have standards, to build standardized websites that will be usable and they will be also accessible, that are readable by different machines, that are just providing the same information to everyone. Doesn't matter how people are accessing that. At that time, accessible website, it means that it has to be, you know, high contrast, very simple platform for messaging. Usually like a black and white or yellow and black, something that definitely is outside of any beauty standards for traditional web design. So from the very beginning, I had the feeling that it should be different. That web accessibility doesn't mean that it has to be an ugly design. Because accessibility means that it should be accessible to everyone. If it's like someone with vision problems, like or blind, or with any other disabilities, or it's a person using the website in a traditional way, it should be the same level of accessibility. But as we know, it took a long time before accessibility is becoming slowly more a standard for everyone, not a niche, not a solution for a government or public services, but something that comes to the real mainstream. And let's start with a technology, because this is something what people usually connect with web accessibility. How many of you in this room just know WCAG? Just raise your hands. Okay, so we have a large group of people who recognize what it means. This is a guideline. This is the most comprehensive and popular guideline for creative and accessible web content. Web content accessibility guideline. The current version is 2.2. Is the latest one and probably the last one from the 2.x series. And it's important to understand it's a guideline. It's not a standard, it's a guideline. So it just shows us direction, but how we follow that guideline, it's up to us. What is important to understand or to remember about WCAG is that it offers 3 levels of accessibility. When 1A, single A, is like a very basic, it means that the content is more or less accessible to everyone. Double A is something that we try to reach from the technology perspective when we are building most of the web content. When triple A is actually a very theoretical level, because it's hard to achieve in a normal environment. So when thinking about the guidelines, about the technology, it's good to know that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to spend a lot of money just to be compliant with AAA. AA is more than enough. So this is like, of course, those guidelines has a lot of different resources on the internet. So if you want to learn more about technology, I strongly encourage you to look for the guideline itself, but also look for different summaries, how it can be applied, how to understand the technology. But for now, I just want to mention that. I don't want to focus on the technology. Because, of course, technology is important. If we follow web standards, if we follow good guidelines, it's good for the website anyway. If we make a technology that makes the store website readable by machines because it's standardized, it's also good for usability and good for SEO. So this is like a very obvious, and that's just simple thing. But when we are talking about accessibility, it's much more than just a technology. Because right now, a lot of companies, they think, okay, we just do something on the website, we just change a little bit in the code, and everything will be accessible. But the reality is that, of course, it is important. But the real accessibility of e-commerce or any web service is much more than technology. It's more about the process, and it's about the whole approach. How we work with every piece of content online to make it accessible for all. Just to mention it, like I will tell you a little bit more about it later, but we have to think that accessibility means that if our customer comes to our website, to our store, it's not only that they should be able to browse for products, find it, add to the cart and finish the checkout. But it's also important that, for example, call center customer service will be accessible. So this is something that not many people think about, that if we provide a call center, there should be also an alternative way, for example, for deaf people. If they want to ask a question, they have some concern about the product, about the shipping, payment, whatever. But when we are going further, we have to remember that e-commerce, it's not really e-commerce only anymore. We are coming back to commerce. So combining online and offline experience. So accessibility is also combining website, but points of sale, physical POS, mobile checkouts, whatever is in the showroom. So this is more and more important topic to understand that e-commerce accessibility is blending with offline world. So brick and mortar solutions, our digital products that are sold, they are all affected by that. And because of that, thinking about accessibility and how it impacts our business is far more than just the technology. Technology is just a start. The WCAG guidelines is the must read to understand a general concept. But the second thing is that it's just the beginning. And here is the thing. Because after all, why we are coming to Meet Magento? Why we are building stores? We are, in most cases, we are not doing it to save the world. Most of the companies or organizations running e-commerce, they do it for a simple reason, for money. So when we are talking about accessibility, we have to face the reality. There are always some people who want to help others. But when it comes to business, there are always decisions. There are always trade-offs. What is more important? What brings money? What makes the company profitable? And if we don't think about money when talking about accessibility, it will be always with the low priority. So that's why it's super important, and I think this is my biggest goal today, to show you how implementing accessibility processes in every e-commerce project can actually bring more money to the investor. So why we have to talk about it? That's what I told you before, that when deadlines are very tight, and we all know that they are always tight. It's like we always have a great plans, and like we think ahead, but then after all, deadlines are always tight. I don't know what magic stays behind that, but it just happens. So when we have to fight for every day, accessibility, if it was not addressed from the very beginning of the project, it will always get a low priority. And it will always be something like, oh, that's super cool, that's super important. We will do it later. We will do it after lunch. And we all know that after lunch, there are other priorities, yeah? Like some fires to put down, some marketing efforts. And again starts the discussion, okay, so what about accessibility? You know, like our customers are not really people who need this kind of special features, so maybe let's do it later. Yeah? And all those discussions, they keep on and on. And when it becomes really important because of the legal stuff or because some of the key customer needs this kind of access, then it becomes quite expensive and problematic. How to do it? How to make the whole website accessible if it was not supposed to from the very beginning? And here we have some real numbers. According to the study by Nucleus Research, that's the number. How much e-commerce stores are losing a year in annual revenues by just not being accessible to some groups of people. So it may be a small number by one simple store or single small business. But if we think about the whole e-commerce sector, that's something what we are losing. We are losing a lot of money. And why we are losing that much money? Because 10% of the population is somehow disabled. So that's a 1/10 of the population of people who are existing, who needs to buy something, who are actually, you know, doing like a daily shopping. They just do normal life, but for some reasons they cannot do that in a regular way. They need some more dedicated ways to use internet, to use the surrounding world, to access different services. So when we think about 10%, let's think how we fight to increase conversion. If we increase conversion by 0.5% and everyone is super happy, wow, we are going step by step, we are making it much better. And then in the same time, having an inaccessible service makes it inaccessible to almost 10%. And it's even bigger than 10% because ability is temporary. That's something which is absolutely the most critical thing to remember. That when we are talking about accessibility, we are not talking about people who are blind, who need assistance because of an accident or because they were born with some disabilities. But we are talking about all of us. Many things can happen. You know, like I use internet with a touchpad or a mouse in a very regular way. But we can imagine that I do something stupid. I just fall here from this stage and break my 2 arms. And then I'm screwed. I have to use internet for some time in a completely different way. So I'm a regular internet user, but for some time, something may happen. I may not use it anymore this way. Of course, the same with sight. Yeah, like a few years ago, I really didn't need it. I didn't need my glasses. Now I need them. So it was all fine 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now it's getting more complicated. So it's really interesting to see why accessibility is becoming a topic right now, why web accessibility. Of course, the world is more open. We think about people who need some kind of a support. But there is also one very simple reason, that people who were actually creating internet, they were young, and now they are not that young anymore. So when they were building everything what we know, they didn't care about that. It was not the most important thing to consider in design, in architecture. But right now, when we are getting older, this is becoming important for us. And when we think about these numbers, we are actually coming to a bigger number. 1 in 6 people experience some significant disability. So we are going to 16% of people who has some temporary problems. So it's really, this number is becoming more and more significant. So that's why it's so important that accessibility or disability is not something that is virtual. Even if all of us here think that it's not my problem, I may think about others to help them. No, actually it will be a problem for most likely all of us here, sooner or later. The number of people who needs this kind of assistive technologies or a more usable access to the internet is growing. That's also important to mention that pandemic showed us that online access in some cases is the only access for many people. So it's not just something that we can live without. In situations like pandemic, when many people were just grounded at home, buying online was the only way to just exist. And for many disabled people, working in the internet is also a way to live a real life, a normal life, to be part of the society, to have a real job. So if some parts of that is not accessible for them, it's not something they can just skip. It's just making everything, super difficult again. So when we are talking about those limitations, if they are temporary or if they are something that we have for life, we have to think about visual, and visual is something that we always connect with accessibility. If the website is accessible, it means that it's accessible for blind people. But this is only one thing. We have some kind of impairments that are speech, auditory, physical, or cognitive. So when planning an accessibility strategy for an e-commerce, it's about technology. It's about making it accessible via different tech, different assistive technologies. But there is also one important thing that many people very often overlook, the cognitive part. So if you think about different merchants, if you are running an e-commerce business or if you are working for an e-commerce business, how often you really analyze if your sales messaging, like emails, SMS, if they are really easy to understand. If the message that we are sending about the shipment, about what's happening with the payment, with the transaction, if it's really analyzed, that it will be accessible to everyone. Not only to people who are graduated from the college, but some people who are, they just dropped from the elementary school. And they still want to do shopping. They want to understand what's happening. And if they understand what's happening, they are more happy customers. Because a lot of problems coming to customer service are not because of problems with actual service that is provided, but this is a problem with messaging. How e-commerce is messaging something that's happening with the order, with the shipment. And so if we think about accessibility, about all those ranges of accessibility, we have to think about customer experience. When we make something accessible for all, it's basically improving customer experience. User experience and users who are becoming our customers. So whatever we do to improve accessibility, it's improving customer service. And here we have some numbers that are just here, that are to prove what I told you before about the age groups and the number of users who actually ordered goods or services. So we can see that how it's changed over years. We are just growing older. We are becoming we are getting closer to the higher group. And we can see that our purchasing power is also growing. Because those people who are older right now and who needs a lot of a different approach with serving web content, they actually have a pretty good purchasing power. So the older the whole society becomes, the more we are losing from not making something accessible for them. So this is just just numbers showing us how active is this age group, but we also have a different numbers. I will show you in a moment. They will show a slightly different statistics. But we can see that in 10 years, this group of users will still be shopping online, and they will not be younger. That's for sure. That's the one thing we can just make sure that it will not change. So even if we don't think about it right now, year after year, it's becoming more important. Because the numbers I showed you at the very beginning, how much money is actually, thrown away through the window, this number will be growing every year. Because people who knows internet, who live in the internet, and who are just who wants to keep doing that, they will be growing older. And this is an interesting report from Poland. How we have how the number of different age groups are distributed across years. Yeah, so we have two reports. E-commerce in Poland 22 and 23. So of course they are showing us trends from the last year, and you can see that the percentage of users who are 50 plus increased from 30 to 35%. That's a big number. Yeah, we are losing younger users, but we are getting those people who are really in our like target group we are talking right now. I'm 44, and believe me, I started using built-in tools for increasing font size. Yeah, and I'm not in this group yet. So this is just a simple example. And even if you think about yourself, I bet that many of you, even far from this 50 plus age group, they think that it would be nice to have something that is easy to read. And when we are talking about reading, about accessibility for people with some vision problems, let's think about other case. Many of us work, live, shop outside of office. Because living the life of digital nomad is cool. Sitting in the cafe, working on the computer, having latte, whatever. But in the nice weather outside, with the sun shining, usually we cannot read what is on the screen, even with the most fancy displays. And it's exactly the same with our smartphones. Like we live with our smartphones. We walk reading on the smartphones. When we wait to the doctor, we read on the smartphone. When we do many other things, we read on the smartphone. And in many cases, when we are on the go, it's really hard to do that. Yes, if the whole content on the website is not really accessible for people who cannot see very clearly, it will not be accessible if we are on the go, outside, in the bright sun, or in any other condition that makes it not a typical way of accessing web content. Then we need accessibility. We need exactly the same what people who are visually impaired for life. And of course, there is a one thing that I used as one of the main arguments years ago, that people prefer brands that care. So right now, accessibility is not required yet everywhere. But this is a very unique chance that if you are here, you want to listen about accessibility, you are in a group who can make an advantage of being accessible, of building accessible content. Because soon, it will be just a requirement by law. not only in US, but also in EU and following in the other countries. So right now, it's a good advantage to use it a little bit as a marketing expense. That we are showing that the whole production on manufacturing process is green. We are showing that we are taking care about the employment and about different ethical approach to our business. So this is just one of the elements. But of course, it's not the most important. For years, I thought it is important. I explained it to my customers or to people we were discussing accessibility. I was always thinking that this is so important that we can show that our brand is socially responsible. But right now, I think it's just a small part of that, because after all, it's all about money. So we are coming back to that slide I showed you before, that social responsibility is important, but it's unfortunately behind money. First money, then being responsible. So it is something we can use for a promotion to show a good side of our business. And if connected together with all the previous things I showed you, it's actually a good return of investment. And now the legal part. Because of course, we want to be socially responsible. There may be some extra money, but still 10% or 16% for some stores is not enough. They say, 10%, whatever. I don't want to spend any money on that. I don't care. So the legal comes to action. For years, there was absolutely no regulation. And what is really a surprise for me is that in this particular field, we are behind US. Usually, Europe was a driver of a change, of a more social aspect. But in this case, US is actually far ahead of Europe. For last couple years, they are testing something called ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Of course, it's covering much more than just a web accessibility. It's covering a general approach to Americans with disabilities. So it describes different types of regulations or guidances, how services and products should be built or should be provided. And what is really important is the lower part of the slide. That because of that, there are lawsuits. I'm pretty sure that, I don't know if we have someone from US here in the room? Oh, no one. Okay, so the legal lawsuits in US, it's a big thing. It was usually much bigger thing than in Europe. In Europe, we were always more laid back, suing each other was not so popular. But in US, it was a big thing. And in ADA, so it's all about accessibility, about buildings, if you can just access a bathroom in a public government, or if you can access a subway. In these regulations, we can see that e-commerce industry is responsible for 74% of the legal lawsuits. So this is where the most of the inaccessible services are noticed. Maybe it's also a place where it's easiest to spot and it's easiest to send a claim. But the thing is that we can see how those numbers are growing. That numbers of cases every year are growing. So we would think that 5 years ago the ADA was implemented. So year by year there should be less of the cases because everyone should be accessible. No. It means that more and more people are actually, they have a knowledge that they have their rights. And if there is something, there is someone taking care of accessibility of the services, actually, if something is not accessible, we can just ask to fix it. And if not, there will be some regulatory that will help us. So there are quite a big numbers. Fines in ADA cases are between 30,000 US dollars to hundreds of $100,000 of US dollars. So this is not a small number, and the number is growing. And now we are coming to EU. So that's what I told you, that EU is behind. Yeah, it's like we are getting there, but there is a pretty long way, but not that long. We have something that is similar to ADA. It's called European Accessibility Act. It's important also to understand that this act is not a standard, it's more a guideline, again, a guideline for the member states. So since it was introduced, member states had time to work on their local regulations, on local institutions who will be responsible for making sure that that companies are following the law, and all that stuff should be actually done, but in most member states it's not. But if we like it or not, there is a deadline, June 2025, and by that date, every member state in EU should have a local law and local regulatories who will be able to make sure that everyone is thinking about accessibility. So we think 25. Okay, we have 23, so it's really far away. But let's think again about e-commerce projects. What is 12 months? What is 18 months? It's nothing. There's always so many things to do in the project that if someone wants to be fully accessible and ready for that by June 2025, it's definitely a high time to start thinking about it. Because if it has to be done in the last moment, in an emergency mode, of course it's super expensive and it will never be a good thing, a good process. But starting now gives a hope that by 25 we will have a proper process, and making our web content or e-commerce service or commerce service combining online, offline accessible, it will be a smooth process, nothing that costs more than just day-to-day operations. So that's how it looks in EU. We have the act, we have the deadline, and of course the digital part is based a lot of WCAG, but it just covers also more than technology. Few facts how it looks like in Netherlands. Netherlands, the same like Poland, is behind the schedule. So our governments, like most of governments in EU, are promising that everything will be ready on time. But as you can see, the initial schedule assumed that by June 22, the regulations will be ready, and by 25, they are ready to be executed, to just be a law. And because of that, of course, there is a plan of the fines, how to approach verification of accessibility, but it's all complicated. And when we think about Netherlands, we can see that it's not that simple, because in the law that is under construction right now, we can see that there are different authorities that will be responsible for different parts of services or products provided. So it will be definitely not a very easy thing to make sure that we follow all of their regulations. So it's better to have a little bit more time to also start at least acknowledge how the new law will look like. So it's much easier process later. Just for example, we have a different authority for financial markets, which covers financial e-commerce services. And we have a different authority that actually covers regular e-commerce services. So like a small thing, yeah? But as you can see in the upper part of the slide, it can make quite a big difference who is issuing a fine. So it may look like it doesn't matter. You know, there are different organizations, different institutions who are obliged to check the accessibility readiness, but maybe big difference who is doing that. So the law is under construction. We are on a good way, but still there is something to be done. As an e-commerce industry professionals, we just have to start thinking about it now, because 18 months will fly. And now, how to be accessible? You know, there are so many different ideas how to do it. You know, just let's make an audit for like thousands of euro, or maybe we just should purchase a service who will just drop a JavaScript and make everything magically accessible. And that's all more simple or more complicated. It depends how we look at that. Accessibility right now is not a rocket science. The technology is all there. We usually build a solution. We build solutions that are more or less accessible because the current technologies, they allow us to do it in an easy way. It's not something super complex. It's not something, some magic that we have to add to our projects to make them accessible. But what is really important, that to cover those benefits of accessibility, it's important to educate teams. Educate teams that are working for implementation, but also educate teams who are working in the merchant business. Because accessibility is not only a matter of a company who is providing a service, providing code or a platform. Like, it's not only Magento agency, but the biggest part of the work is on the merchant side. Because I told you about the processes, about customer service, about deciding how clients can reach us, what other alternative ways of accessing our service can be possible. So it's all about building the right process, because it's not that complex. You know, like adding a web chat, a text chat to the voice customer service, it's not a big deal, but it just needs understanding why we are doing that, why we need it. The same with defining new features. If we think about new features for a store, I don't know, new payment provider, or maybe some feature to compare prices. It's just a one line in the requirements. Please make sure that it will be accessible following the guidelines. It's not, in most cases, it doesn't need any extra work. It just needs to make sure we will not break it. So it's not about making something extra, it's just not to break standards who are with us for the last 20 years. So it's all about education, that if we educate teams working on both sides here, we can actually get all of those benefits. Opening to wider audience, encourage elderly customers, yeah, all of us. Better usability, it doesn't matter where they use it. But also bringing some marketing benefits. Reducing risk of digital lawsuit, maybe not yet, but in 2 years it will be something important. And helping different search engines or robots or machines to read or perceive our web content in the same way that our users are doing it. So, to make something accessible, it's just good to remember what it means accessible. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So we have to be able to do something. We have to be able to understand what we are doing. And the solution should be stable and robust enough so that it will be still working after some time. So it's a process. The building is one thing, but then maintaining and just keeping the same process is just a must-have. Because if we build an accessible store and then start dropping some content like photos or videos in an inaccessible way, we are breaking again our accessibility. So it's a process. It's something that we have to do day after day. What I told you a moment ago, widgets are not enough. There are a lot of companies who just build a business out of it, that they provide a JavaScript stuff that adds a toolbar with different cool icons to make text larger, to change contrast. No, it looks cool, it's fancy, but it's not really what accessibility is about. It's not a treatment, it's just patching. Yeah, we are not really healing the problem. We are just patching it and trying it doesn't. We are pretending it doesn't exist. So that's not a way, and that was actually proved by some of the lawsuits in US. That websites that thought that they are fully accessible because they have those pretty widgets, they actually were surprised and they had to pay. So this is what it's all about. Raising awareness and understanding what is accessibility and why it matters. Why it's important in the company to bring more money in the revenue, to have more happy customers, and in addition, be a socially responsible. Management, customer service, store managers, system architects, product owners, tech teams. Everyone should be somehow educated about accessibility. Everyone, because only in that case, people will understand that it's not something super complicated, that it's a matter only of, I don't know, management or only engineers. No, everyone should know some basic to understand why we are doing it. If everyone knows why, it will be much easier to do it. And I think that's it. I hope that after this presentation, you will have a better overview of the accessibility situation right now. You will keep looking for more resources on your own, because this is a very broad topic. And because of that, it's very important to contribute your experience and your knowledge. The same, like, we do a great stuff with open source. Like, open source gives us a lot of opportunities. That's what we're doing with couple partners like Hyvä, Amasti. We are contributing a lot of work to make their products more accessible. So it's accessible by design and help others build better products on top of that. So in the same way, if you have some cool solution and you made it accessible for your own, this is the moment when it's really important to share it with others. Just contribute, because it's not an advantage to have it, only for yourself. It's advantage to be the first and to lead the charge to help others be more accessible, because soon everyone has to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuba. Unfortunately, there is no time for questions because